Hello everybody, my name is WizThrift, and I am here today with a friend of mine, Jay, and he is from the channel Play Your Role. Jay, could you give yourself a little introduction?
Of course, my name's Jay. As you said, I run the channel Play Your Role. I mostly talk about whatever's on my mind for D&D that day, with a focus on as much positivity as I can possibly bring. That's my whole channel.
I mean, that's a pretty good summary of your channel, I'd say. So
Thank you.
I have a little no, I wouldn't call it a monologue, but just a little paragraph that I want to read really quick. So
yeah.
And I tried to, because this is the second time we've tried to record this, and finally it's gonna work out. But so you're a very talented individual, and from your slam poetry that gave me chills and brought me to tears, and helped me better understand my role as a dungeon master, or being able to go off script video after video. Primarily the one that I think about the most is your paladin video about why we should play paladins. And getting these amazing points out. My first question is, where does all this creativity come from? How did it all start?
You know, it's funny because, like you said, this is the second time we've tried to record this, and I probably would have had a different answer the first time that we did this. But I released a video yesterday talking about just burnout in D&D, and in it I was talking a lot about why I put so much emphasis and value in D&D, and that kind of changed my perspective of being able to talk through that even just to a microphone alone in my office. But I think mostly where my creativity came from is growing up, I didn't have a creative outlet. I grew up in a religious background. I was the jock sporty kid, which is really funny because that's not who I am at all these days.
Yeah.
But that's just what I put my value in because I had no way of being creative. And my brother, we shared a room. He had these night terrors growing up, and so the only thing I could do creatively is I would tell him stories to help him go to bed, and that's the most that I had. And eventually I tried writing stories with my friends, but we were high schoolers with no actual education and writing out of the occasional English class, so that didn't go well. So I think most of my creativity comes from just my 20 plus or 23 plus years on this earth, not being able to create and now having the chance to. And so I think it's just all these ideas that I had as a kid, and now I get to express them at least in one way or another. So
Dang, that's a fantastic answer that you can kind of pinpoint how it's brought you to where you are today. Do you think it's because it was just building up for years, and now that you have this creative outlet, you're able to let it all out?
I think it was always there, but being able to let it out, even in a small degree, it wasn't like it's a pent-up energy and now that it's all coming out, it's just going to go away. I think of it a lot more as if it was like a weed that constantly was trying to grow, and it finally got access to water or whatever have you, and now it's actually growing. So it was always there and trying. It refused to die, no matter how hard my circumstances tried as a kid. But eventually it did come out. And so I definitely think it has a lot to do with that, and it feels like I just have all this experience in the past that I can now rely on to continue to create. So.
Dang. I mean, that's fantastic. And it's kind of like how plants eventually can break through concrete. It's it will, I guess Jeff Goldblum said it the best, life finds a way. So creativity finds a way.
That's one of my favorite things to do in my session is whenever my players question anything about monsters specifically, I'll just say life finds a way. And I'll just leave it at that as my hand waving, it's D&D, whatever. That's one of my favorite quotes to say. So
that's awesome. No, I really love that. And I think I said it and I've prepared this, but you really are talented. You seem to have, you seem like you're a pretty well-rounded person, and you've said it before that you're a jack of all trades, master of none. And somebody who I actually interviewed earlier this week, they're like, all dungeon masters are bards. We're all weaving these stories, and we're giving inspiration, and we're trying to make others feel happy and feel heroic. And so I definitely agree with that, and I think you personify that very well.
Thank you. I honestly believe that anybody who well, I mean, we were literally just talking about this, but anybody who decides to dungeon master, we were talking about being YouTubers, but I honestly think anybody who wants to dungeon master has to be just a little crazy, because you're taking on so much. And I see a lot of people get down on themselves like, well, I'm good at this, but I can't do voices, or I'm kind of bad at tracking combat, or this or that. I'm like, okay, so yeah, you may be failing a little bit in that one area, but there's all this stuff you have to be able to do, and you took it all on. So I definitely think you're absolutely correct. Dungeon masters have to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah. I mean, your channel called Play Your Role. You're all about role playing. Do you and I assume that's probably your favorite part of role playing games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've heard a lot of your voices throughout your videos, whether it's narrating a descriptive short story for talking about a class, or if it is doing your Dragonborn Artificer, or whatever voice you're doing, you're really good at that.
Thank you.
How have you practiced these voices? How have you gotten better at them?
Oh, okay. So it started out with so I wanted to be a voice actor when I was like 16. I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I started trying to practice just in my own room whenever I drove to work, which I worked 5 minutes down the road. So it was literally like a small little window to do this. Yeah. I tried to practice these voices. And my sister at one point, I don't want to give specific names because I think there might be a breach of privacy, but she came and she was like, hey, there's this big voice named actor. Have you ever heard of him? I was like, absolutely. He plays my favorite characters. Yeah. She was, okay, cool. I just interviewed with him. I'm trying to be his personal assistant. And that blew my mind. And so I got so excited about that. I never got to meet him. He did say he wanted to meet me, but ultimately she did end up getting the job because there were 2 other candidates and they went with the other one. So I never got to meet him, which made me super sad. But that really sparked something. And then only maybe a year later, I started watching Critical Role with all those voice actors. I was like, I gotta do this. So how I practice voices is 2 parts. One, I've been told that this is a neurodivergent habit. I honestly don't know, but I cannot help but mimic people's voices when I hear them. It's just, I eventually start to do that. And then 2, whenever I am alone, I just start practicing voices based off of ones I've heard repeatedly, just because I think it's super fun. And so that has the benefit of hey, I get to practice these voices, but it also means it's very difficult for me to come up with new voices, and that's always frustrated me a little. So yeah.
No, I mean, hey, that's actually that's a good way to do it, because doing a really high-pitched voice, or a Scottish accent for a dwarf, or a haughty accent for an elf, that's all fine and dandy, but when it comes down to it, really doing real voices, I think that's the best part, and I think that's what'll make your world and your NPCs seem realistic.
Exactly.
You can get a laugh out of your players for a really high-pitched hulking guy, which I love doing that archetype of whatever, but in the end, it gets tiring and whatnot. So I think doing real voices is the way to go.
I find it a lot of fun. And on the topic of doing high-pitched voices, currently one of my campaigns, one of my players who just joined, they're currently transitioning. And so I wanted to understand a little bit about that. So I started looking at voice feminization lessons, hey, how does this work? And I realized there's a whole vocal range out there that I don't have access to. And I got really excited. I was like, I want to be able to do those voices. And so it's just it made me realize that, I've been practicing voices, but there's a whole actual technique out there. And so I think once you get those techniques, you get to do your more mainstay NPCs with the realistic voices, and the one-off, one-session NPCs where you can just go ridiculous with your voices. And I think that's super fun.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. My next question is, it's more about inclusivity, which is something that I would say you're kind of getting known for, at least in your circle. So Dungeons and Dragons, and to an extent all role-playing games, is about bringing people in. It's an essential part of building up the communities and making friends. is bringing people in, why do you think there's gatekeepers and people who say, no, you can't do that, or no, you can't play with us?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a hard question. And I'll do my best to answer, but I don't know. I say this at the beginning, like every video where I talk about a serious thing, but like, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything, but so I'll give my best input. I think gatekeeping is a very natural thing that humans do. And it is because we all have to feel as if we naturally are good at something. We all have to feel like we have our thing, right?
Yeah.
And so when people come in and mess up the status quo, you have two options. You can get excited because that means that there is something new to explore, or you can get worried that it's going to ruin what you already have. And so anytime somebody gatekeeps, it's not an acceptable behavior, but I do think it's an understandable one. And it really, I think I have been guilty of gatekeeping in the past. And I've been very fortunate and lucky. My family and my wife, they've done a very good job of helping explain to me, like, hey, here's how you're being harmful, right? Yeah. This behavior isn't good. And it's helped me learn that, but I had to learn from them first. So honestly, I think people gatekeep not because they don't want other people to enjoy what they're doing. I really don't think that's the case, but I think they're worried about losing what they enjoy. And that is an irrational thought process, but you don't always realize that. So,
gotcha. No, I think that's a pretty perfect way to explain it. You seem to be an extremely, maybe not extremely, but you seem to be a very empathetic person. Is that just kind of what's always been for you, or did you have to like work at it, or what exactly happened there?
Unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because it's caused me problems, I'm a very empathetic person, whether I like it or not. I don't think I had to work for it. I think it's just I was kind of born empathetic and learned it from my family, because I didn't grow up in like the healthiest home life. Definitely not the worst. I love my family, as much problems as they cause me, but I do love them, and it was not the worst, but there were some problems. And my dad and I were the most similar, but obviously he was out at work, and so I was the only person at home, surrounded by 4 other very strong-willed personalities who constantly butt heads with each other.
Gotcha.
And I was the only laid back one, and so I took it as my job as a kid, which, you know, every kid thinks that they're responsible for something, to empathize with each of them and help each other see each other's points of views. And I think that did help shape it. I think what really helped me nail down my empathy, however, was later on in life I would start to meet people who would become incredibly frustrated at the world because they could not understand others.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't because of that other person's actions, it was because they couldn't understand them. And I realized just how hurtful that can be to you as a person, because if you are hurt by somebody else's actions, but you don't understand them, there's no way of rationalizing it. All you do is feel pain. So gotcha. I think that's where my empathy came from, was the start of early in life, and then moving forwards, realizing that's where a lot of people got hurt from, and just wanting to better understand that. And there was a point in my life where I wanted to be a writer as well as a voice actor. And the only reason I wanted to write is because you got to write from other people's points of views, and then people read from those points of views so they could understand. So
I mean, that's really nice. That's really cool. I think as a dungeon master and just as a human being, to be successful, you have to learn empathy. And well, I mean, you are a writer. As a dungeon master and whatnot, you are a writer. You have to write. You have to learn these things. Just like in your Cursed Sword episode video, you talked about what it was like to not understand, or to not know what your gender was, or to not really understand your gender identity. And so I think that's amazing that you're able to learn those things, because I haven't really experienced those things before. It's things that I haven't really had to experience before, but I think with the way that the world's going, we need to, even if we don't always agree with it, we need to at least understand, or at least try to understand.
It's a theme I often explore in my campaigns, but I truly believe no one means wrong
Yeah.
Now that is not always true, unfortunately. Some people do, but I don't think it's natural to humans, and this is purely speculative, but I don't think it's natural for them to mean wrong. And so in a world where everything seems to be going wrong, the best thing you could do is trying to figure out where they're coming from. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean you have to excuse it. But if you understand it, things become easier in being able to work with each other. So I explore that a lot in my campaigns, much to the chagrin of my players sometimes, because I find it so hard not to play a villain who's not sympathetic, which sucks, because sometimes players just want to fight an evil bad guy.
Yeah.
So I try really hard to give that to them, but there's always that feeling in the back of my head, like, but what if they understood? So I have to push that aside sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, that's kind of a good segue into philosophy, like RPG philosophy. What are some of your like philosophies of role-playing games or just gaming in general that you just will always use, or that have shaped your games?
The first is that I am not the author of my story. My players are. I am merely the narrator. And I figured that out because I think I've talked about it in one of my videos, but the first game I ever ran, I did Lost Mines of Phandelver. In fact, I have the original module with my notes in it still sitting on that shelf over there.
That's awesome.
And what we did was we all went to the game store, we bought it together. We had very large misconceptions of what D&D was, and they said, well, Caleb, you want to be a voice actor, you want to DM the first week and we'll rotate. We didn't understand it. I ended up being the DM just from then on. But and about halfway through the module, I had not read far enough. They got past it, and rather than tell them that, I panicked, and since we were doing it all on Discord at the time, I just tossed the module over to the other side of the room and was like, all right, we're improvising here. I don't know. And from that point on, I realized that no matter what I put in front of my players, they found something interesting to do with it. I didn't have to know where the story was going, only that I was giving them something fun to do. And so from that point on, I had a very strong philosophy of when I create a campaign, I create the world. I know what important forces are there, and I know what those forces are doing. My players will create the story, though. They will write it. All I have to do is tell them how the world reacts to what they've done. And I very much believe that, because it's very easy for us as Dungeon Masters to want to write a story a certain way. And it's understandable. We want the players to have fun. Hey, here's this cool thing I thought of. But anytime I've ever tried to do that, my players have seen it and thought something totally different. And it wasn't what I expected. And I could either run with it and let them have fun, or let them know that they didn't have agency. So I think that's like the number one thing for me is the players are the authors. I'm just the narrator of the story. So.
No, I think that's my players. They enjoy their games, unless they're just lying to me for almost 2 years. But they enjoy the games that we play together, and I just but it is hard sometimes to step back and be just the narrator and just
let things happen. So
you go.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I think that's just the number one thing. And the only other thing that like is a really big theme at my table is players have to find a conclusion to their story, and it doesn't have to be a happy one. It doesn't have to finish the story, but there has to be a conclusion, because recently, because of circumstances, I've had to end many campaigns before they've finished.
Gotcha.
And I never stop hearing from my players about those characters. Even though the campaign never ended, they always wanted to explore them more. And so whether it's a character death, whether it's a sad ending, whether it's a happy ending, I think it's very important that they get to feel that, because in a way, by concluding their character's story, they conclude a section of their own personal lives. And I think that's important for them to have. So
I think it's important that we're able to finish their stories and to let them kind of overcome that part of their lives.
Yeah, I agree. Entirely.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, my next question. So what stories or experiences have shaped the way that you personally tell stories?
Oh, Are we talking about inside of D&D or out?
Outside, like media.
Outside. Okay.
Or even just personal experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I read a lot of books, and I don't remember any of them. Don't know why, but I don't. But one of my favorite stories that I do remember was this very weird story called The Phantom Tollbooth. It was kind of an educational story, honestly. I read it so many times. It was about this strange little kid who got this toll booth that appeared in their house. They built it because it was like a gift. And when they went through it, it took them to this weird magical world. There was no structure, no storyline, just total BS the whole way through. I loved that story. Yeah. And I realized, I think it has shaped my storytelling since then. Not any way that it told the story, because it really didn't do it well.
Yeah.
But the fact that in this story, I was so excited for every new scene, every new location.
Yeah.
And I very much believe that no matter what you do in a story, the next section should cause you to think, hey, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. And so that's always been very important to me. And then it's really cliched, and I think it gets a lot of hate because it's been around for so long, but I grew up on the Marvel movies and comics. Mm-hmm. That was like at its height as I was growing through my teenage years. And I love those movies. I see their flaws. I know why people don't like them. I totally get it. I do. But I very much enjoy those stories because a lot of them simply touch on the fact of like, hey, what if there was a person who could just do more? What did they choose to do with that? Mm-hmm. And that always meant a lot to me as a kid and a teen growing up. And so I think that's very much influenced any story I've told, written, D&D or otherwise, is any story I've ever told is about somebody who could do more. And what is it that they chose to do with that? So I think those are the main two things. I know that's kind of weird answers and not like the, oh, well, I grew up with Lord of the Rings and love that. But, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think doesn't matter who you are. If you're into fantasy, Lord of the Rings has shaped your experience in some way. Whether
I love Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong.
But like, this is how dwarves are. This is how elves are. This is how humans are. Yeah. Humans will always ruin everything, no matter what. But they'll persevere through it. But I love hearing, like, I think I've heard of the Phantom Tollbooth, but I really don't know. It sounds like such a like obscure kind of cursed story in a way. Yeah. But and I think the Marvel movies, what you're saying about like, what if one person could do more? I immediately thought of Captain America, Steve Rogers, when Thanos, he came in and with all the Infinity Gems except for the last one he needed, and he tries to go down, and Steve, he holds him for like a second, but he still tried. He still did it, and that's one reason why I love Captain America is he just doesn't give up.
Exactly.
So, no, I love that you bring that up, because it's just, it doesn't matter how many stories there are, there will always be stories made of human perseverance and moving on. It's just because like there's just something inside of us that we need those types of stories for.
I agree entirely. In fact, I guess the last story that really shaped me was Dragon Ball. I loved Dragon Ball as a teen.
Same.
It's got a lot of problems story-wise, like story structure-wise. It's got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But I loved it. And what's weird is, so I really love the character of Goku, which I know a lot of people do, but it's funny because there was always like this argument of whether like Goku could beat different characters.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was like aside from the point, because the reason I liked him was that he couldn't beat anybody he ever came up against. He just found a way to. He was always on his back foot. And that was why I liked the character. Yeah. And so any story that emphasizes like, hey, you probably can't beat them, but you're going to try, like that Captain America scene. That is, I don't know, those are my favorite stories, absolutely. And it's actually influenced a few of the homebrew rules that I put in my games, but yeah.
No, I mean, the thing about Goku is he just wants to fight. He just wants to grow and get stronger. And yeah, Dragon Ball, plenty of problems. Honestly, not very good storytelling, in my opinion. But like, I still love them. Yeah, Dragon Ball Z Kai, the theme song. Oh
man, it's so much nostalgia.
I know people have problems with Dragon Ball Z Kai, but just the theme song is just it's so good. It's so good.
Anytime anybody tells me about a problem with Dragon Ball, I'm like, yeah, I agree. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But did you get chills when he went Super Saiyan? Because I did. And like, that's all I really care about.
Didn't you feel just insanely pissed off when Frieza killed... Oh, sorry, spoilers, guys. When Frieza killed Krillin, I mean, it shouldn't be spoilers to this point. It's been out for years, but...
Yeah.
And then Goku just gets so pissed off and snaps.
Exactly.
Oh, man. So
that's the thing for me. It's like, I don't think it's a great story, but it definitely shaped how I tell stories in certain moments.
No, I think that's the important thing. Like, so even if we don't like a piece of media or whatever, I think it's important that we take things that are good and put them into whatever we're creating.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Well, my last question here. And it's something that you talk about a lot. We touched on a little bit, but how can we bring more inclusivity into our role-playing games?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a hard one to answer because I'm still figuring it out.
Gotcha.
So like I said, I am a white cisgendered male. There have been people who've argued with me on that. There are people who don't believe that I'm straight. I am. I don't know why that's so hard to believe. Growing up, I played football with the same team for 5 years, and for 2.5 of those years, they thought I was gay. And good on them, because it was never a problem for them. So good on them.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me that like high school boys didn't have a problem with it. But once it finally came out, I was like, no, I'm straight. But for some reason, people think I am. Whatever. I don't mind. But because of that, I didn't get to experience so much. And there are people in my family who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. There are people very close to me just outside of my family that are.
Yeah.
And I honestly gave them pushback for a large portion of my life. Just because I grew up in a religious background. And I didn't tell them they were wrong. I just told them I didn't agree with them, which I've changed my tune on since then. But the point is, being inclusive is very difficult to do, especially when you're somebody who has not had to fight for your right to be yourself, which is who I am. I haven't had to do that. So I think the best way you can be inclusive is to look at yourself and figure out why you have problems with it, which is what I inherently had to do. And I had to be confronted by people close to me. But it is so easy to not want to include things because you don't think it's important, but it's not important to you. And so I guess the best way to put it is in my first campaign I ever ran, it was not very inclusive at all. And it wasn't intentional. I just didn't realize it. And I often would text my players, hey, anything I could be doing better? And one time somebody responded and said, I don't think you're being very diverse with your characters. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, well, we've yet to meet a female NPC who's not this certain age range and acts this way.
Yeah.
They were totally right to call me out for that. Very embarrassing for me at the time to realize that. But my first reaction was to be upset at them for calling me out. And then I had to take a look and say, well, why did I think that?
Yeah.
And I had to figure out where that came from. And it was just because that was my experience. So I had to intentionally diversify. Yeah. And so I think inclusiveness just comes to yourself. It comes to understand where you're coming from, and then realizing what you don't know. And go explore that. Go figure that out. So I realized that I don't understand gender issues. I've always been very confident in the fact that, yes, I am male. I'm not the most masculine individual in the world, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I dance and sometimes talk effeminately. Good deal. I enjoy wearing makeup from time to time because it makes me look pretty. I don't think that makes me less of a man. It's just he doesn't want to look pretty sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah. But once I started actually thinking about, hey, what is my blind spots here?
Yeah.
That's what helped me start being inclusive. Is what do I not understand? Okay, how do I go explore that? And D&D is a great way to do it. So yeah.
No, that's a fantastic answer. I think having to look at ourselves to know why that affects us is an amazing point, and something that I think much of the world right now, especially in this time that we're at, needs to do and needs to continue to do, because who knows, like 5 years ago all these gender issues and things weren't a big problem, but now imagine 5-10 years from now what the world's going to be like, or if we're even here. So
exactly.
But no, I think that we need to be more diverse and bring that into Dungeons and Dragons. So
I think Dungeons and Dragons is an amazing way of exploring all those things you don't feel comfortable exploring elsewhere, and that goes on many different levels. I played a villain. This was where I was trying to actually be a villain and not play a sympathetic villain. And so they ended up being very forthright with their intentions towards some of the party members. They were a creep, is the best way to put it.
Okay.
And I felt just nasty and dirty playing this character the whole time. I felt like I needed a shower.
Yeah.
But afterwards, after finishing playing that, I understood why I found that behavior so reprehensible.
Yeah.
And before then, I probably could not have given a very fair answer, except that I just don't think it's right. And I think it's very important. If you're going to be opposed to something, you should understand it. And I think that's the largest problem, is people find that they're opposed to something and then decide to not look into it because they're opposed. And I think that's a little backwards.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think it's a simple example, but my players they are playing different set of characters because their other characters died, and they're going into hell to save them. And essentially, one of the main players that kind of hired these new heroes is an alternate dimension version of one of the dead heroes.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It's lots of shenanigans of timelines and time travel and whatnot. But the one of the players, she was playing the sister of this big player, and the big player thought her sister was dead. And when she told me, "Oh yeah, I'm the sister to this character," I had never experienced a dead sibling before. But when I was playing that character and you're like, "Oh, my sister, who I thought was dead for years, is alive," I actually cried. And it was and my players were kind of surprised, and I was like, "Guys, I'm invested in this almost as much as you guys are." And this is a big moment. I don't think you guys understand. And so I think it's important that we can experience these things in D&D, so that way we can take them into the world and continue with it. So
100%. Just last night, I ended up playing one of the ex-lovers of one of the characters. And oh shoot, some of them asked to watch this after we were done, so I can't say specifics.
Okay.
Basically, she had betrayed her, which in one way or another, and so I had to play this ex-lover who had betrayed the person they loved and thought that they had gotten them killed, essentially. And that was really hard. And I've had 2 girlfriends in my entire life. I had my first girlfriend, we dated for 4 months, didn't work out, broke up, all right. And then I have my wife. That's the 2 people. So I've never experienced having to sit there and think, I really betrayed this person. And experiencing that, I didn't cry, but I definitely got teary. And it's just not something I would have experienced before that. And so the ability that D&D gives to hop into other people's shoes, to experience those different things, is incredible. It's not the same as actually going through it, but it definitely gives you perspective. And I think that's really valuable.
Yes. No, that's fantastic. And I'm not just saying this to brown nose or toot your horn or whatnot, but your videos and your content has really been kind of the gateway for me to learn and explore these things some more, because you're doing it in a way that interests me, which is Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games and whatnot. So I just wanted to thank you for being willing to talk about these things, even though they're hard and difficult to get right. And I just say I think you're doing a fantastic job of
thank you
giving a new perspective to us white dudes.
Thank you. And you know, I really just can't take all the credit for it, because there have been so many people in my life who have helped me see these perspectives. And that initial video I released about inclusivity, the very first one on Exandria Unlimited, I mentioned offhandedly to my wife, I'm thinking about doing this. And she went, okay, go do that. Like that's a good idea, and I know you're gonna back out of it.
Yeah.
So go do it. So I think it is very important in this journey to learn more about other people, to have people around you who encourage you to keep bettering yourself. Otherwise, it's really easy to just get trapped. So,
yeah, 100% agree. And that's awesome. Jay, thank you so much for sitting down with me for this time and talking to me about all this stuff and letting me pester you with questions. I truly appreciate it.
It is an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate sitting down with you and being able to talk and just being able to go back and forth about this hobby that we love so much, because it means so much more than a lot of people realize. So I really appreciate it.
Of course. No, it's I mean, obviously it'd be nice to have a lot of people and, you know, watch me and whatnot, but it really is just a joy to meet new friends and to learn from people. And one thing I've learned is everybody essentially has the same thoughts and feelings on D&D. It's a way to express yourself creatively, but the way that people express it is very individual and very different, and that's the thing that I love about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, I love your Theros book back there. It's probably the best cover of all the D&D books by Wizards.
100% agree.
And
100%
one of my
agree.
favorite settings that they've brought into the game. So.
I knew very little about Theros because I haven't dove into that section of Wizards of the Coast, but I read through that book and was inspired more times than I've ever been just going through it, and I love that book so much.
Greek mythology is one of my favorites ever since I was young, and that book, it's probably a little ways off, but I am just waiting to run a Theros / Greek Roman adventure because it's just so cool. It's just so cool.
Agreed, 100%.
Anyway, well, Jay, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and I will talk to you soon, and I hope you have a great night.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks, Colin.
Okay. Bye.